The Interstellar Academy floated in orbit above a blue-green moon, shining like a pearl among the stars. It was a place where hundreds of young cadets from many planets came to learn peacekeeping, diplomacy, and defense. Every corridor was filled with different voices and different colors of skin, fur, or scales. The cadets came from calm worlds that had not seen conflict for thousands of years. They wanted to learn how to protect peace, not how to destroy it. When the new semester began, excitement filled the great hall. Fresh recruits in crisp uniforms marched in line, their bright eyes reflecting curiosity. Among them was Lyra, a silver-eyed Xynar who had never been beyond her home system. She believed the academy would be full of noble ideals and teamwork. For her and her classmates, serving in the galactic forces was a symbol of honor. Their instructors were known across the stars, each a master in strategy or diplomacy. But there was one name whispered with both awe and uncertainty: Commander Hayes, the only human instructor at the academy. Most of the cadets had never met a human before. Some said humans were unpredictable. Others said they were too emotional to be logical soldiers. Lyra had heard many stories that humans once fought endless wars among themselves, that they had nearly destroyed their own planet before learning peace. She did not know what to believe. When the day of Commander Hayes's first lecture arrived, the auditorium was almost full. The large transparent windows showed a view of the galaxy beyond, distant stars blinking gently. The cadets chatted quietly, wondering what kind of teacher he would be. Some imagined a tall, cold officer who spoke like a machine. Others expected a strict disciplinarian. Instead, when the door opened, they saw a calm man in a simple gray uniform. His face showed years of experience, but his voice was gentle when he spoke. "Good morning, cadets," Hayes said, his tone steady but kind. "Today begins your course in planetary conflict analysis. My goal is not to teach you how to fight, but how to understand why beings fight at all." The hall became silent. The cadets listened carefully. His words carried a different weight from the other instructors' speeches. There was no pride or boasting, only quiet sincerity. Hayes walked to the center of the stage, his hands behind his back. "Many of you have heard stories about Earth," he continued. "Some true, some exaggerated. You may think humans are primitive because our species once went through centuries of conflict. You may even think we are dangerous. But today I want you to see us as we really were and are." A murmur ran through the crowd. Lyra felt both interest and hesitation. The words "see us as we really were" sounded serious. She whispered to her friend, "Do you think he's going to show old battles?" Her friend shrugged nervously. Hayes pressed a button on his wrist device. The lights dimmed, and a holographic display appeared above the stage. A rotating sphere of Earth. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. It looked beautiful and alive. "This," Hayes said softly, "is home." The room fell into quiet admiration. Even those who had traveled to 100 worlds felt something calm when they looked at the tiny blue planet. Hayes let the moment linger before he spoke again. For many years, Earth was divided. People fought for beliefs, for survival, and sometimes for reasons no one remembers now. But through it all, there was something else, something that kept us from disappearing completely. "That is what I want to show you." He paused, as if deciding how much truth the young cadets were ready for. "You will not see weapons or blood," he said firmly. "You will see what lies beneath those things, the emotions, the choices, and the cost of misunderstanding." The cadets nodded, a bit more comfortable. Lyra leaned forward, her silver eyes shining. She wanted to understand this strange race that had suffered so much yet still joined the Galactic Council as equals. Hayes began the lesson with stories rather than images. He told them about old Earth disasters and how humans worked together to rebuild. He spoke about explorers who crossed dangerous lands not for conquest but to connect worlds. He described a time when doctors and rescuers risked everything to save strangers, and how teachers in ruined cities continued classes under candlelight so that children could still dream. As he spoke, holographic scenes appeared, villages rebuilding, people helping each other, small lights glowing in dark places. The cadets were silent, their earlier excitement replaced with thoughtful wonder. They had studied history before, but not like this. The lesson was not about numbers or victories. It was about endurance, compassion, and the strange power of human hope. Then Hayes asked a question that surprised everyone. "Tell me," he said, "how does your world respond to loss? One by one, cadets shared their answers. Some said their people focused on logic. Others said they preferred silence and meditation. Hayes nodded to each answer, listening carefully. Then he said, "Humans grieve loudly. We cry, we write songs, we build monuments. We carry the memory with us because forgetting feels like losing again." That sentence settled deeply in their minds. Even Lyra felt a lump in her throat. She had never thought of pain as something to be honored. To her, sadness was something to avoid, not to remember. But Hayes spoke as though remembrance was sacred. For the rest of the session, Hayes guided them through the timeline of Earth's transformation, from chaos to unity. He explained how humanity finally learned peace not by erasing its past but by facing it. He told them that humans joined the galaxy not because they were the strongest, but because they were the most stubborn about hope. When the lights brightened, the cadets looked different, quieter, more reflective. The lecture had not shown a single act of violence, yet it had carried more impact than any simulation they had ever seen. Lyra found herself watching Hayes with new respect. He stood with calm eyes, not proud or ashamed, only truthful. "Tomorrow," Hayes said finally, "we will continue. You will see recordings from Earth's historical archives. You will witness not battle, but courage. The moments when ordinary people faced fear and chose to do what was right. It will not be easy to watch, but it will help you understand what humanity truly means." As the cadets left the hall, whispers spread among them. Some said the human was too emotional. Others admitted they were curious. Lyra remained silent. She felt something she could not name, part curiosity, part dread, part admiration. She looked back once more before the door closed, seeing Hayes still standing under the soft glow of the hologram Earth. That night, in the dormitory filled with quiet talk, she couldn't sleep. The image of the small blue planet stayed in her mind. She wondered what kind of strength it took for a species to come from such hardship and still smile at the stars. And deep down, she felt tomorrow's lesson would change everything she thought she knew about humans, about war, and about herself. The next morning, the academy felt different. The halls were quieter, the air heavier. Word had spread overnight that Commander Hayes would show something unusual in his next class. Some cadets were excited, others nervous. Many didn't know what to expect. Lyra sat with her friends in the cafeteria, her breakfast untouched. "Do you think he's really going to show real history?" she asked softly. Her voice carried both curiosity and unease. Her friend Rin, a tall alien with emerald skin, shrugged. "Maybe it's just more stories," he said. "Humans like to talk about emotions. It's their way of teaching lessons." But Lyra shook her head. "No, I think this time will be different. The way he spoke yesterday, it felt like he was preparing us for something important." When the class hour arrived, every seat in the holographic theater was filled. The wide circular room glowed with pale blue light. A faint hum filled the air as holographic projectors came online. Commander Hayes stood at the center again, calm and serious. He looked at the rows of young cadets, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. "What you are about to see is not a simulation. It is a record of real events. There will be no destruction shown, only choices, moments that tested who we were as a people." The room grew still. The cadets sat straighter. Hayes touched his wrist device, and the room dimmed. The first hologram began. It showed a small group of humans in rough clothes standing in heavy rain. The wind blew hard. There were damaged homes behind them, but the people were not angry. They were helping each other rebuild. Some passed food around, others comforted children. A human woman smiled while handing a blanket to a stranger. Hayes narrated softly. "After great hardship, our people learned that survival was never about winning. It was about standing together when everything else fell apart." The cadets watched silently. Their eyes followed the people's faces, tired but kind, weary but determined. Lyra felt a strange tightness in her chest. She whispered, "They look so fragile, but they keep moving." Hayes continued, showing other scenes. Rescue workers guiding others through storms, scientists working to clean polluted rivers, and communities rebuilding schools in ruins. Each moment showed cooperation, not chaos. At one point, the projection showed an old man planting a tree in dry soil. A voice from the recording said, "We plant trees not for ourselves, but for those who will come after." Hayes paused the scene and said softly, "That's what kept us alive as a species. We always believed tomorrow could be better." Several cadets nodded slowly. Others looked at each other. realizing that humans had found strength in hope, not power. Then the next hologram began. A series of quick images showing people standing before great challenges, refusing to give up. Hayes explained, every generation faced something different, storms, hunger, fear, but each time humans found a way to rise again. Rin raised his hand. Commander, he asked, how did your people survive so many hardships without losing their minds? Hayes smiled gently. Because we learned to turn pain into purpose. We don't forget our mistakes. We carry them. That's how we grow. There was a deep silence after that. The cadets seemed unsure what to feel. They were trained to think logically, to separate emotion from duty, but the lesson they were watching felt alive with emotion, too real to ignore. Hayes moved to another segment. Now, he said, I will show you what our historians call the Silent March. It's one of the most famous events in human history, not because of what happened, but because of how people responded. The image shifted to a cold landscape. People were walking together across snow carrying banners of peace. They weren't soldiers. They were citizens from every walk of life. There were elders, children, teachers, and doctors all walking silently for a single cause, unity. The cadets watched closely. There were no shouts, no weapons, just quiet determination. The sound of footsteps in the snow echoed softly through the theater. Hayes said, they walked for days through freezing winds to prove that peace was worth more than comfort. Many could have stayed home, but they believed that one small act of unity could change the world. Lyra's silver eyes shimmered. They were just normal people, she whispered. They weren't forced to do it. Exactly, Hayes replied. No one commanded them. They chose. He paused the hologram again. You see, cadets, every species seeks strength in its own way. Some build ships. Some build weapons. Humans build stories. Stories that remind us who we are and who we never want to become again. The words hung in the air like music. Even the faint hum of the projectors seemed quieter now. Then Hayes showed one last scene. It was not dramatic. It showed a small classroom under candlelight. A teacher wrote lessons on a broken board while children read from torn pages. This was after a long period of darkness on our world, Hayes explained. When our systems failed, education did not stop. Parents became teachers. Hope was kept alive by small acts like this. The cadets leaned forward, watching the faces of the children, their soft laughter echoing through the hall. Lyra whispered again, so this is why they call humans unpredictable. They never stop trying, even when everything is lost. When the projection ended, the lights brightened slowly. No one clapped. No one spoke. Every cadet sat still as though afraid that moving might break the silence. Hayes looked at them carefully, his voice calm. Now you have seen what it means to be human. Not our strength, not our weapons, but our endurance. Many of you come from peaceful worlds where conflict ended long ago. I envy that. But peace means nothing if you don't remember how much it cost to achieve. He looked down for a moment, then added softly, humanity's greatest gift isn't intelligence or power. It's the heart, the will to keep going even when logic says to stop. For several seconds, the room remained completely still. Then a cadet in the back slowly stood up and asked, Commander, why show us this now? Why not tell us stories from other worlds? Hayes gave a small, thoughtful smile. Because every cadet here will one day make choices. And I want you to understand that real courage doesn't come from orders or fear. It comes from compassion. If you can understand that, then you'll never misuse your strength. When the class ended, no one rushed out this time. They walked slowly, deep in thought. Some wiped their eyes quietly. Others kept their heads down, pretending they weren't affected. Lyra walked last, her heart full and heavy. She turned once more before leaving. Hayes was still there, standing near the holographic display of Earth, watching the blue planet spin in silence. His expression wasn't proud or sad. It was peaceful, as if he had seen this reaction many times before. Outside, the stars sparkled above the Academy dome. Lyra felt the universe had suddenly become bigger and more mysterious. For the first time, she understood why humans were both feared and admired. They carried something unseen, something that could not be measured, something powerful enough to move hearts across galaxies. And she knew, without realizing it, that this lesson would change the lives of everyone who had witnessed it. Interstellar Academy. The mood had changed after the last session. Many cadets walked slowly, lost in thought. Some could not sleep the night before. The lesson they had seen from Commander Hayes still played in their minds. The faces of humans who stood in rain, who smiled through pain, who kept walking no matter what. Lyra sat alone by the large window overlooking the stars. She held her study tablet, but she wasn't reading. Her thoughts kept going back to the holograms. She remembered the old man planting a tree and the teacher writing under candlelight. She had always believed peace came from power, but now she wasn't sure anymore. Rin approached her quietly and sat beside her. "You didn't eat breakfast again," he said softly. "I wasn't hungry," she replied. Her silver eyes were distant. "Rin, do you think humans are dangerous?" Rin frowned. "I used to think so, but now I think they're just different. They're not afraid to feel pain. They almost use it as fuel." Before they could speak further, the academy's bell sounded. All cadets were summoned to the central auditorium. Word spread quickly. Commander Hayes was going to show the final part of his history lesson. Many felt nervous. Some whispered they didn't want to go, but duty required them to attend. When everyone gathered, the large holographic dome dimmed again. Hayes stood at the center, silent for a while. His calm expression carried both sadness and pride. "Yesterday," he began, "you saw the strength of humanity through hope. Today I will show you something deeper. You will see moments when we faced fear itself, and what we did when we had no reason left to keep going." The cadets exchanged glances. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The lights faded and the first projection appeared. It showed a scene from an ancient time, a group of people trapped in a storm, building shelters together, using their bare hands. There was no sign of giving up. Hayes narrated, "This was during a time when Earth was broken. Yet even then, no one stood still. They built. They helped. They survived." The next scene showed people helping strangers they had never met before. A woman shared her only blanket with someone shivering nearby. A man carried supplies for another who had fallen. Hayes said, "Humans often forget their differences when faced with suffering. It reminds them that everyone is made of the same fragile soul." The cadets grew quiet again. Lyra could feel her chest tighten. It wasn't sadness, it was something else, something hard to name. Maybe admiration, maybe confusion. Then came a short sequence showing people singing together after long hardship. Their voices were soft but strong, filled with life. Hayes said, "Even in our darkest times we found light in each other's voices. Songs became our strength." Lyra noticed several cadets wiping their eyes quietly. The emotion in the room was heavy but peaceful. Hayes turned off the hologram for a moment and faced them. "Now tell me," he said, "what do you see in these humans?" A cadet from the red-scaled Dravic species raised his hand. "I see people who do not fear loss," he said. Another cadet whispered, "I see madness, but also love." Lyra slowly stood up. Her voice trembled. "Commander, I see people who live through pain and still find reasons to smile." "I don't think I could ever do that." Hayes nodded gently. "That is honesty, cadet. And it's the first step to understanding us." He smiled faintly, then turned the hologram back on. "There is one more thing I want you to see." The room darkened again. This time the scene was quieter, a wide field under a gray sky. Humans of all ages were standing together, holding small lights in their hands. Hayes said softly, "This was the day of memory. Once every year, humanity gathers to remember those who came before, to honor both victories and mistakes. We light candles to remind ourselves that peace is not free, and that forgetting the past only invites it back." The image of the glowing lights filled the room. The cadets were completely silent. One young alien whispered, "They remember even the painful parts?" "Yes," Hayes replied, "because every scar tells a lesson." After that, he ended the projection and looked at his students. Many avoided his eyes, overwhelmed. He spoke gently, almost like a father speaking to his children. "When I was young," Hayes said, "I used to think humanity's history was something to be ashamed of. But as I grew older, I realized it was our mirror. We learned who we were by facing what we had done. The same lesson is true for every species. You cannot serve peace if you are afraid to look at what peace costs." The hall stayed quiet. No one clapped, no one moved. Hayes turned off the system and stepped back. "This concludes our session. You are free to go," but no one stood up. They just sat there, lost in thought. Finally, one cadet, Lyra, rose slowly and spoke, her voice shaking slightly. "Commander Hayes," she said softly, I can't continue in military training." The whole hall turned toward her.
Hayes did not react with anger or surprise.
He simply waited. Lyra continued. "I joined the academy because I thought being a soldier was about pride, about wearing a uniform. But now I understand what true strength is. Humans fight not because they want to, but because they must protect something they love. I don't think I can carry that kind of responsibility." Rin stood up beside her. "I feel the same," he said quietly. "If the galaxy ever faced something like what humans did, I don't know if I'd have the courage they showed." The room filled with murmurs. More cadets stood one by one, echoing similar words. Some said they respected the lesson but could not go on with combat training. Others simply handed in their resignation forms silently, their faces full of emotion. Hayes watched them quietly. His expression stayed calm, but his eyes held deep understanding. He did not stop them. He only said, "If this lesson helped you find your truth, then it has done its job." Almost half the cadets stood before the session ended. Some walked out in silence. Others bowed respectfully to the human commander before leaving. When the room was empty, Hayes looked up at the still holographic image of Earth, blue and small in the darkness. He exhaled slowly. He hadn't wanted to scare them or drive them away. He had wanted them to understand the heart behind humanity's strength. But maybe that truth was too heavy for young hearts to carry. Still, as he turned off the projector, a faint smile crossed his face. Because those who left had done so with understanding, not fear, and those who stayed, he could already see something different in their eyes. They didn't just want to be soldiers anymore. They wanted to be protectors, and for Commander Hayes, that was enough. The halls of the Interstellar Academy were unusually silent that evening. The echo of footsteps was soft, and the usual hum of laughter and debate was missing. The resignations from that morning had left a deep mark. More than half of the cadets had decided to leave their military studies after the human history lesson. The rest stayed, but even they were quiet, their faces thoughtful. Commander Hayes sat alone in his office, a simple room with a wide glass wall that looked out into space. From there he could see the swirl of distant stars and the glowing arc of a nearby nebula. A small hologram of Earth hovered on his desk, spinning slowly. He stared at it for a long time, lost in his thoughts. He had taught many classes before, but this one had been different. He hadn't expected so many to walk away. His purpose had never been to frighten or break them. He only wanted to help them understand the truth about strength, that it did not come from weapons or orders, but from compassion and endurance. Yet maybe, he thought, that kind of truth was too heavy for those who had never known loss. The door chimed softly. "Enter," Hayes said. A young cadet stepped in, and it was Rin, the tall green-skinned student who had stood beside Lyra earlier that day. He looked uneasy but determined. "Commander," Rin said respectfully, "may I speak with you?" "Of course," Hayes replied. "Sit down." Rin took a seat across from the desk, his eyes uncertain. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly, "for walking out during your class." Hayes shook his head gently. "There's no need to apologize. Everyone must find their own path." Rin hesitated. "But you looked sad when we left." Hayes gave a small smile. "Perhaps I was. Not because you left, but because I know how hard it is to face truth for the first time. When I was young, I too wanted to run from it." Rin frowned slightly. "Did you ever want to leave the military?" Hayes leaned back, his gaze drifting to the stars outside. "Many times. But I stayed, not for duty, but to teach others what peace truly means. You see, peace without understanding is fragile. It breaks easily. My job is to make sure it doesn't." Rin sat in silence for a long moment. Then he said, "Commander, may I ask something? Why do humans remember so much pain? Why not forget and move on like most species do?" Hayes looked thoughtful. "Because forgetting makes us blind," he said softly. "We remember not to suffer again, but to protect what we've learned. Every tear we shed in history became a promise to do better next time." The young cadet nodded slowly, his eyes shining faintly. "I think I understand now." Before leaving, Rin saluted respectfully. "Thank you, Commander. I may not return to the military track, but I will continue studying peacekeeping. You changed how I see strength." When the door closed, Hayes exhaled quietly. That small conversation reminded him that not all lessons were lost. Even if half the class had resigned, something within them had awakened. Later that night, as the stars brightened outside, another knock came. This time it was Lyra. She stepped into the room holding a small silver tablet, her official resignation form. "Commander Hayes," she began softly, "I wanted to give this to you personally." Hayes accepted the device but did not open it. "Are you certain, Cadet?" She nodded. "Yes, I thought long about it. I joined the academy because I wanted to become someone strong, but after watching your lessons, I realized I don't want to fight battles. I want to help prevent them. I want to protect others before war ever begins." Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were firm. Hayes felt a quiet pride stir within him. "Then you've already learned the greatest lesson I could ever teach," he said gently. "True strength is not in fighting. It's in preventing the need to fight at all." Lyra smiled faintly. "You said something yesterday that stayed with me. You said humanity's greatest gift is the heart. I think I understand now. You didn't show us wars, Commander. You showed us hearts that refused to stop caring." Hayes was silent for a moment, touched by her words. He finally said, "You see, Cadet, every generation of humans grows up hoping never to repeat the mistakes of the last. And yet somehow the world always tests us again. What saves us isn't perfection, it's memory." Lyra's silver eyes reflected the stars beyond the window. "Maybe that's why the galaxy needed to meet humans," she said softly. "To remember what strength really means." Hayes smiled, his eyes kind but tired. "Maybe so." As she turned to leave, Hayes said quietly, "Lyra, the universe will always need people like you. Not soldiers, but witnesses. People who remind others what peace costs." Lyra paused, her hand on the door, and whispered, "Then maybe that's who I'll be." She gave a small bow and left. When she was gone, Hayes sat in silence again. The stars outside glimmered like quiet memories, each one carrying a story of its own. He thought about the cadets who had left. Maybe they would go home and teach others. Maybe their choice to walk away was not weakness, but the beginning of something new. The next morning, reports spread through the academy that the Galactic Council had requested an explanation for the sudden mass resignations. Some council members were angry. Others were curious. They wanted to know what kind of lesson could cause so many promising students to abandon their training. When Hayes appeared before the council screen later that day, he stood straight, his expression calm. The holographic faces of the counselors stared down at him. One of them, a tall elder from the Seraph species, asked sternly, "Commander Hayes, do you understand the consequences of what you have done? You have disrupted the entire academy schedule." Hayes replied firmly, "With respect, counselor, I did not disrupt it. I simply showed the cadets the truth." "And what truth is that?" Another asked. Hayes met their gaze. "That strength without compassion is meaningless. That war without understanding is only destruction. If half of my cadets resigned because they could no longer see glory in battle, then I have done my duty." There was silence after that. Even the hologram seemed to flicker softly, as if the council itself didn't know how to respond. Finally, one of them said quietly, "Perhaps this was a lesson we all needed to remember." When the meeting ended, Hayes stepped out into the empty corridor. The light from the nearby star washed over the floor in golden shades. He felt both tired and peaceful. Later that day, he visited the training yard. The few cadets who had stayed were practicing quietly, but something was different about them. They no longer moved with the pride of soldiers. They moved with the calm focus of guardians. Their expressions were softer, their teamwork smoother. Hayes watched them for a while, then whispered to himself, "Yes, this is how it begins." He turned his gaze upward toward the stars. Somewhere among them, the cadets who left were carrying his lesson home. They might never wear the academy's uniform again, but they carried something far more powerful, the memory of what it truly meant to be human. And Hayes, standing alone under the vast galaxy, felt at peace knowing that his world's greatest legacy wasn't in its power, but in its heart. Weeks passed since the lesson that had changed everything at the Interstellar Academy. The large campus, which once echoed with the voices of hundreds of cadets, now felt quieter but wiser. Those who remained were no longer the same. Their minds had matured, their hearts had softened, and their understanding of strength had deepened beyond pride or competition. Commander Hayes continued his classes as usual, but there was a new calmness in his voice. He no longer needed to speak loudly to gain attention. His presence alone was enough. Every student who sat before him looked at him not just as a teacher, but as someone who had shown them the true meaning of courage. One morning, as the stars outside began to fade into soft daylight, the Academy received a transmission from the Galactic Council. It was addressed to all instructors and cadets. The message was clear. The council had reviewed the reports from Hayes's class and wanted to make a statement. The cadets gathered once again in the same hall where everything had begun. The holographic dome flickered to life and the faces of the council members appeared, their voices echoing gently through the room. Members of the Academy, the head counselor began, we have reviewed the incident involving Commander Hayes's class. At first, we saw the resignations as a loss. But after studying the reports and speaking with the cadets who left, we realized something greater happened here. Those students did not abandon service. They found a new kind of service, and one rooted in peace. A quiet murmur ran through the audience. The counselor continued. Some of the former cadets have begun helping their home planets develop programs in peace education. Others joined interplanetary aid groups. What began as a lesson became a movement. The Galactic Council wishes to thank Commander Hayes and the Academy for reminding us that the purpose of defense is not to destroy, but to protect life. The hologram faded. The room was silent. Hayes stood motionless, feeling a quiet warmth in his chest. He had not expected recognition, but hearing those words filled him with peace. After the announcement, the cadets who had stayed gathered around him. Rin stepped forward and smiled. Commander, I think your lesson reached farther than you thought. Hayes smiled softly. Maybe it did, but it wasn't my lesson alone. It was humanity's lesson, one we keep learning again and again. Lyra, who had come back to visit the Academy that day, entered the hall just in time to hear him speak. She had left weeks ago, but now she wore a light silver robe instead of a cadet's uniform. She looked peaceful, more confident, as though she had found her own path. Commander, she said warmly, I came to thank you. Hayes turned toward her, surprised but happy. Lyra, he said kindly, how have you been? She smiled. I've been working with the Peace Council on my homeworld. I've been teaching children what I learned here, that true strength is kindness and true courage is compassion. They listen, Commander. They listen because it's something the galaxy forgot. Hayes looked at her proudly. You found your purpose, Lyra nodded. Yes, and I wanted to tell you that what you showed us changed not only how I see humans, but how I see myself. Rin added, she's not the only one, Commander. Even those who stayed have changed. We don't dream about medals anymore. We dream about protecting life. Hayes's eyes softened. He looked at the faces of the young cadets, once restless, now steady and wise. Then the galaxy will be safe, he said quietly, because peace begins with hearts like yours. Later that evening, Hayes walked alone through the training field. The air was calm, filled with the soft hum of the Academy's shield generators. The sky glowed with gentle light from nearby stars. He paused near the edge of the observation deck, where the vastness of space stretched endlessly. From his pocket, he took a small metallic emblem, the badge of Earth's Peace Corps, old and worn. He had carried it for years, a reminder of the promise his world made after centuries of struggle, never to forget what war had cost them. He looked at it for a long moment, then smiled faintly. As he stood there, one of the young cadets approached quietly. It was Rin again, carrying a small data pad. Commander, he said softly, the students are preparing a small memorial tonight. We'd like you to attend. A memorial? Hayes asked. Yes, Rin replied with a proud smile. Not for the ones who left. For the lesson they left behind. Hayes nodded slowly, his heart full. Of course, lead the way. That night the entire Academy gathered under the open observation dome. Each cadet held a small floating light in their hands, glowing softly like fireflies. Lyra stood among them, having stayed to join the ceremony. The air was quiet and respectful. Rin stepped forward and said, these lights represent memory, the same way humans light candles for remembrance. Tonight we honor the lesson that changed us, that peace is not weakness and understanding is the greatest strength. He turned toward Hayes and continued, Commander Hayes showed us humanity's heart, but what he really did was show us our own. Hayes stood still, deeply moved. He didn't speak right away. He let the moment breathe. The lights floated up slowly into the night sky, one by one, drifting upward like tiny stars joining the heavens. The sight filled the dome with warm light. When Hayes finally spoke, his voice was calm but emotional. "Thank you, cadets. When I first joined this academy, I thought I was here to teach humans past, but now I see I was meant to share humanity's hope. Every world, every race, every being has its own history of struggle. But what connects us is the wish for peace. Never lose that." The crowd stood in silence, their faces glowing in the light. For the first time, it felt as though every world represented there was one family. Different, but united by understanding. As the last of the lights disappeared into the sky, Lyra whispered to Rin, "Do you think humans know how much they've changed us?" Rin smiled gently. "Maybe they don't need to know. Maybe it's enough that they reminded us what it means to care." The stars above shone brighter that night. Even the galaxy seemed to listen in quiet respect. Later, when the ceremony ended and everyone returned to their quarters, Hayes stayed behind alone. He looked up at the stars one more time, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. He whispered softly to himself, "Maybe this was Earth's greatest victory. Not in battle, but in memory." The hologram of Earth shimmered faintly on his wrist device, glowing like a blue gem among the endless black. Hayes smiled, saluted quietly toward it, and whispered one last line before turning off the light. "May the galaxy never forget who we were and what we learned to become." And with that, the human commander walked away slowly, leaving the quiet dome behind. The stars continued to shine, carrying his message through the infinite night. A message not of fear, but of hope, compassion, and the enduring heart of humanity.